That was a great question, so I just wanted to record it. I'll try not to use my recording voice.
You
I think
already.
like you pointed out that like sometimes when I'm like speaking, I like sound different than when I'm just like answering someone's question. And so that's when I'm like, right, I enjoy like talking to people, answering people's questions. And it is interesting, like, oh, I can notice that switch. So yeah, this is my normal voice. So what were you we were talking about like self-doubt. Uh what were you asking about again?
Well, I was telling you about how I was watching a some YouTube video about like consumerism or something. Not even a research heavy video. And she brings up a quote from your book or from something that you wrote. And when I heard it, I was so surprised. I was like, "Oh my God, I know that guy," which
Right.
was really cool. And then I told you, and then
Right.
the way you
I'm
described
slightly
it.
offended that you're so surprised because you should be surprised.
I was surprised because I was like, oh my God, she essentially said my name. I work with that guy.
Well, what's funny is like I I'm not really like it's I'm delighted to like see my name referenced. Like it's not surprising to me because like oh I know like the value of the upward spiral and like the stuff they've created, but I just wanted to record this because um like even I have imposter syndrome and lots of self-doubt, particularly when talking to people who have never heard of me. So it's like very easy to be confident in front of people who are like, "Oh my God, I loved your book." Like, "Oh, I see how like you can help me." Like, "Oh, how can you help me with this thing or whatever?" And it's like, "Oh, I know all of the answers." And it's easy to feel confident. And particularly when I remember like, "Oh, right, like my book has sold like 200,000 copies and it's in 12 languages. And I'm like a UCLA professor. Like, right. Like, when I'm thinking about all of those things, like, it's easy to feel confident and assertive. Um, but sometimes you're not thinking about those things. Like, I'm writing a second edition to the Upward Spiral right now. And the editors, made some suggestions on my new editions, and I'm like trying to figure out like how to explain complex concepts like how rumination relates to the default mode network, which was like stuff I didn't include in the first edition. And it's like when you're stuck in the weeds, I'm like maybe I can't really explain like why I should be able to do this better. Like right there, like the editors are commenting like this part isn't needed, and like it's very easy to get caught in self-doubt when you're focused on all of the things that you can't do easily or all of the reasons you might be wrong. And what I've noticed is I like my habit circuit, when I say I like my habit circuit, once you get stuck in black or white thinking, thinking like either, oh no, I'm a famous neuroscientist and author and coach, and like people shouldn't question me, they should just listen to me. Versus like, what? I'm just like a regular guy. Like, what do I even know? Like, why should people even listen to me at all? And like, that's how it feels because like your brain wants to simplify things. And so it's easy to get stuck in that black or white thinking. And when you're stuck, like, yeah, who am I to say this? Who am I to try and help people? Like you can really spiral downwards and convince yourself that you are less valuable than you are. You can find reasons to doubt yourself. but the truth is almost always more nuanced than the black or white. So like one of the problems I have with things like manifestation uh is a lot of times like or thinking positively. They're like, no, you have all these great that you're a UCLA professor and you wrote a book, like tell like you slay, like you just tell yourself how amazing you are and whatever. And it's like, right, all of those things are true. And it's helpful to focus on them. And yet your doubts and your concerns are often also true. So if you just try and ignore them, a lot of times these deeper circuits in your brain will just keep shouting them. Because you're like, oh no, but what if you offend somebody? What if somebody disagrees with you? Because like it's true. You could offend someone. Someone could disagree with you. And if you're like trying to argue with your own brain, like, no, shut up, I'm going to ignore you, then you're only going to be so successful insofar as you can successfully ignore those fears. But it's like, that's a really fragile place to be because then the second there's a crack or you start to worry or whatever, then it all crumbles down, you spiral downward. The more stable place to be is accept that both things are true. Like, yeah, I have helped lots of people and I'm really knowledgeable. I've spent decades studying this stuff and I've struggled to try and understand it and learn it. And I'm really good at a lot of these things. And I'm not perfect. I'm not the best person to help everyone. Like those things are true, but I'm not going to let the things I can't do stop me from doing the things I can do. That's a paraphrase from John Wooden, the UCLA basketball coach. Like, but that's also a really important thing to keep in mind. And I'm not going to let the things that, don't matter as much keep me from focusing on the things that are more important. And those two things, just being clear about what's important to you and what you have control over, like that's the essence of the upward spiral method. Like all you need to do is just be clear on those things. And the challenge is like, knowing which is which. What's important, what's not important, what you have control over and what you don't have control over. But I just wanted to share that because, like, if you're doubting yourself, if you have imposter syndrome, like, that's a totally normal thing. Like, I have a PhD. I'm a professor at UCLA. I went to, Brown University. I was had straight A's in high school. I wasn't a valedictorian like some people. I was the salutatorian. Right. But like even you, like you were the valedictorian. And you're probably like, oh yeah, but my high school wasn't that difficult. Whatever. Like you can always find reasons to dismiss your accomplishments. And part of the reason your brain does that is if you're the kind of person who cares about other people or being humble. And, these are good qualities and they're good to have. It's just sometimes they can get you in a spiral of self doubt or make you question things. They can get in the way of stuff that's important. And in those situations, you don't want to get mad at yourself for having doubts. You just, yeah, those doubts are totally valid. And now I'm just going to focus on how I can help people.
Yeah, it seems like there's so much benefit to just like taking a moment and reflecting on what you're thinking and really considering how you're going to react. Um yeah, so that if that could be like so beneficial, it makes me wonder, why does our brain sacrifice nuance to make these quick judgments about ourselves when
Oh,
we know
yeah.
that we could just take a moment and
Yeah. It's
work it out and feel
right.
much better?
It's because the nuance is a luxury. Like almost all of these things of you're like, why does the brain do this? Um, you know, it almost always makes more sense when you can put it in the context of how the brain evolved. So like some of these things like don't make sense in your current situation. Like, well, I have enough money and I have like, why am I, stuck in stress? It's like, right, your brain evolved in a different situation. Like your brain evolved 200,000 years ago. So think about like what would things would be like if you were like a hunter gatherer 200,000 years ago. Um, and the human brain also didn't evolve all at once. So we have sort of several operating systems like layered on top of each other. Most of your brain evolved, tens of millions or hundreds of millions of years ago, uh, with a simple sort of survival trick of like, well, I'm alive now, so I should just keep doing whatever I've been doing so far, and that'll keep me alive. And that's like what the brainstem and these deeper habit circuits do, and that's how most animals are operating, and they do great. Um, Humans over time, like we evolved these like emotion circuits, and then the newest part of the brain is this like analytical thinking, but like those deeper circuits are much faster and more automatic. So we like to think like, oh, we're so rational and we think analytically about everything, but like, no, that's just like a part of who you are. It's a skill that you have. But when you are stressed or threatened, the deeper circuits take over. And looking at the nuances is not a priority. It's not helpful for your survival. Um, if just if you were walking across the African savannah and you see a lion charging at you, like it doesn't matter. Like, well, but I just had lunch. Oh, I'm not warmed up. Like, oh, like, is that lion really running at me or is he chasing the guy next to me? Like, how old is that lion? Like, is it really that dangerous? Like, no, your brain shifts to survival mode of black or white thinking of either run or fight. Like, freeze is another, like, you got to do something and you got to do it fast. And trying to understand the nuances only increases the danger. And so, like, that's how your brain evolved. Nowadays, the dangers aren't always as explicit, but if you are having an emotional response, then your brain is sensing some problem with your world that's in some way connected to your survival. It might be very tenuous connection, but our brains are really good at thinking symbolically. So like um if you're worried about what your boss thinks about your presentation, that can be really stressful. And you're like, why am I so stressed about this? Doesn't make sense. Well, you have an emotion. So it's helpful to acknowledge like, well, your emotion makes sense in some way. It might not make rational sense, but like only a very small part of your brain is rational. So stop invalidating or dismissing or ignoring your emotions because they don't follow this like logic. Um, and often there is some sort of symbolic logic or emotional logic that you can find, like, oh, yeah, of course it makes perfect sense why you're so stressed about what your boss thinks, because it's important to you to do your best. And it's important to you what your boss thinks about you. And also, it's important to you to have this job. And I suppose like if you did poorly on this and you did poorly on other things and you did poorly on other things, then you might lose this job and then you might get fired. Then you might not be able to feed your family and whatever. Like, oh, so it's important to me to be able to provide for my family, right? I don't think it's logical that how I do in this presentation is going to um, affect me, my ability to feed my family. But like, but the emotional circuits in your brain like don't care, and that's what they're reacting to. And once they get activated, they don't have time for like all this nuance. They're just like black or white, good, bad, yes, no, go, don't go. Uh, and uh, and that's where a lot of people go wrong is like they have these emotional reactions and then they say, that's dumb, that's stupid, I shouldn't have that. Well, that doesn't make them go away. It just means they're working behind the scenes and they're often pulling the strings, and then they're in control and you can't do anything about it.
Hmm. So, it sounds like you're saying that like black and white thinking is more advantageous for survival, whereas nuanced analytical thinking is more advantageous for our well-being. And earlier,
Right. Well, because we have to be like a lot of times people denigrate stress. They say stress is bad. Stress isn't bad. Stress is your ability to um, react and respond to shit that's happening. Like, yeah, if a lion is charging at you, it's bad to not react with stress. Like, stress is your body reacting, pumping adrenaline, like, do something about it. If your uh, boss and all of these new clients are going to be sitting in your new presentation today, it's bad to not be stressed about that. Like, stress improves your performance. It's just that too much stress can sometimes impede your performance, but like too much stress is bad, but too little stress is also bad. So the fact that we have stress is essential, but like stress helps us rise to the occasion and perform at our best. But if you're always thinking that stress is bad, then you're not going to be good at using your ability to be stressed. So what we want to do is like, well, in times when I don't have the luxury of thinking more deeply or nuance, or I need to act quickly, great. I'm going to use my stress response, and my emotions and habits are going to act boom, 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 boom. And that's when you're like in the zone and like everything happens automatically and it just feels like it's effortless. And that's wonderful as long as you have good habits programmed into your brain. But sometimes we have to reprogram those habits because they're creating more stress than necessary. And, um, but like, there's times where it's helpful to sit and think and like understand the nuance and analyze and strategize, and that's wonderful. And there's times where it's like, nope, that's great, but like we gotta get shit done right now. And you gotta
yeah.
know when when is good for which. Otherwise, you're gonna be stressing yourself out unnecessarily and making things harder than they have to be. And also, you're going to be underutilizing your stress response and not taking action when you need to because you're going to be stuck like, no, but maybe I just need to think about this more.
Hmm. Um, Earlier you said that like when you experience imposter syndrome, that you typically experience it with people outside of the neuroscience community because you feel like, you're not recognized or appreciated because people don't know you. And it makes you and it makes you consider, whether or not you're successful or, whatever the heck you think. And I wonder how you go through your thought process of grounding yourself and telling yourself like, oh hey, this is the black and white thinking that I need to get out of. And I asked you if the method of considering how your kids think of you or how your wife thinks of you or even how I think of you or your students at UCLA,
Well, yeah,
if that's helpful to you. And I
yeah.
wonder that because we are not like even our praise to you is not the praise that you're seeking from these people outside of the community.
Well, it's funny that like, um, yeah, often like my goal is to help. more people. But often that means like, right, helping people that haven't heard of me yet. And so they're going to have more doubts or more questions. And that's why I remind myself, like, right, it would be easier to just talk to people who already know me and think I'm amazing. That would be easier. It would be more comfortable. So why don't I just do that? Well, you need, in order to overcome those emotions, you need a reason, you need a deeper purpose, a bigger why. And so I remind myself, like, right, I'm not just doing it for no reason. Like, I'm doing this because it's important to me to help more people. If I just wanted to do what was easier, well, then I would just like, you know, teach the class at UCLA and like get all these, amazing reviews and just like, you know, talk to people who already think I'm great. And that would feel better. But I am willing to feel that discomfort and that doubt because of this goal that's more important to me. And if at any point it feels overwhelming, okay, well, then I can just momentarily retreat and remind myself, like, well, at least the people who know me the most think most highly of me. It would be more problematic if it was reversed. If the people who know you the best like thought the worst of you, is okay, well, my kids think I'm amazing, and that's more important to me than whether strangers think I'm amazing. My brain's like, yeah, but I want both, right? Because like my brain thinks it's a temper tantrum. It's like, right, thank you, brain, for reminding me that it would be easier to have a bigger impact if all these other people were following me on Instagram or whatever. But like, it's not as important as what I already have. And the grounding piece is often about gratitude, is being able to appreciate what you already have. And uh, where people go wrong is then thinking in black or white that, like, well, just appreciating what you already have doesn't make everything else, all your other problems go away. It just puts them in perspective. Uh, and so, like, if I want to feel good, then I can remind myself of the people who are most important to me, the things in my life that aren't going to change. Like if you have a big presentation, it can feel like everything is riding on it. If you're like, oh, right, well, like my wife is still going to think the same of me regardless of how this presentation goes. Like my kids are going to still think the same of me regardless of how this presentation goes. Well, then this presentation doesn't feel quite as stressful
Mhm.
because I just put it in the context of all this other stuff that's more important to me. Uh, then, uh, well, like, well, I lost my train of thought as I often do because there's so many things that are important. But the uh, this is what I've realized is the essence of it is focusing on what's most important. And often when you are um, engaged in bigger goals and big dreams, growing your business, growing your career, trying to help more people, make more money, like whatever it is, the goal oriented part of your brain is like so good at um, activating dopamine and drawing our attention that it's really easy to ignore and overlook the most important things in your life, often because the most important things in your life aren't at risk. Like they're just there. So yeah, your family's still going to love you the exact same regardless of how this presentation goes or whether you have a job or not. but because it is stable and consistent, it doesn't automatically draw your attention. And so you don't, your brain won't automatically remind you of it. You'll instead focus on all these things that are out of your control, even if they're not that important. And so the way to stay grounded is to remind yourself, like, well, what are the important things that won't change as a result of this situation? And like research shows that that helps lower cortisol, like lower the stress hormone cortisol, because you're like, well, yeah, obviously you would like to have everything as easy as possible. But like reminding yourself of your values, of the people who are most important to you, puts everything in context. And you, like if I said like, well, what's more important to you, um, your furniture or your family?
The
Well,
furniture.
obviously, like, oh, it seems dumb to ask it, right? And yet, like right now, there are fires in Los Angeles. Um, but I don't like my heart goes out to people who are more directly affected. I mean, my daughter like had her school canceled. Like my parents were in the voluntary evacuation, like alert or evacuation alert area, whatever. They didn't have to evacuate, but we like convinced them to come stay with us. Just like we were indirectly affected. But like it's very easy to get run away with anxiety of like, oh my God, but what if the fire moves here or whatever? And it's like, okay, well, I know that I don't want my house to burn down, right? Or my furniture to lose my furniture or to lose power, right? But I can recognize like, well, that's not anywhere near as important as like the safety of my family. So it's like, okay, well, we're not in a dangerous area. So I know like we'll have, I mean, it's very unlikely the fire's going to come here, but like even if we did, we'd have enough notice to leave. So I have full control over the things that are most important to me. And my brain's like, yeah, but what about the furniture? What if your power goes out? I can be like, oh, yeah, I don't want my house to burn down. Like, I don't want to lose power, but like, it's nowhere near as important as the other stuff. And that, like, this is what I always talk to people about, when coaching clients that it like just comes down to these things like what's important to you, what do you have control over, and often what's programmed into these deeper circuits is stuff that used to be important to you or stuff that was really important to your parents and so it got translated into your brain, or stuff that's kind of important but outside of your control and so it triggers really strong emotions even though the stuff that's more important might be more under your control, but your emotional circuitry won't automatically draw your attention there. So you need to do it intentionally by reminding yourself of what's most important. And like, that's where gratitude can become really helpful, not to do battle against your negative emotions, your fears, but to put them in context. Like, yeah, it's reasonable that I'm worried about losing power. And I like to think of it as improv, like a yes and like, and I'm really glad that, my family is safe. Both of those things are true. The black or white thinking in your brain, be like, but what if this and what if that and whatever? And it's like, oh, but that, it's like, well, the world is more complex. You can have many wonderful things and there can be uncertainties. But when your brain is really stressed out, it wants to shift into that black or white mode. And that's where you can recognize, like, oh, thank you, brain, for trying to remind me of all of these things that are also important to me or potentially out of my control. And I am going to shift my focus towards what's most important at the moment.
hmm Um, yeah, so you said that you're black and white thinking. Oh, sorry. No, that's not what I want to say. You said it's important to you to know a lot of people so that you can make a greater impact. So when you meet someone like one of these marketing people who doesn't know you, do you ever walk away from
People
that?
I'm marketing to. Uh, right. Yeah. What was that?
Sorry, I was gonna say like when you meet those people who don't know you and make you feel that way, and like when you leave from that, do you ever
It's
have like
helpful.
an
It's
instant
important to realize
realization
this
of
other person is not making me feel that way. This other person, like other people, don't make you feel certain ways. They trigger habits or beliefs that are already in your brain that make you feel that way. I am making me feel that way. Like
yeah.
they are the like if someone um just pass someone on the street and you smile at them, they don't smile, they frown at you, and then you're like, oh my God, did I say something that, to upset them, or am I doing something wrong or whatever? Like you are making you feel that way because of the assumptions that you're making about why they are behaving the way they are behaving. This is like one of the most crucial concepts I think that I've learned and that I teach my clients. It's called reflective function. Like you can observe what other people are doing, what their actions are, so on. What you can't know is why they are doing it. You can only make guesses at that. And the human brain is so good at making guesses and making assumptions that we don't even realize we're doing it. So I'm not going to, we don't usually experience it as like, oh, that person frowned at me. We experience it as, oh, that person doesn't like me. What you don't know that they don't like you. Like you can see their facial expression. And because of your assumptions that they were looking at me and their face was making this frowny gesture, that means that they don't like me. But maybe they weren't even looking at you. You're like, no, but their eyes were pointed right at me. Right. Maybe they were lost in thought and they were upset about something else that they were thinking about. So, like, you can see what they're doing, but like, you make all these assumptions and interpretations. And the assumptions and interpretations that you make are what trigger your emotions. And the real challenge in all of this um, is that like you need to do that on yourself as well. Like you can see your own actions, but you're also not always aware of your own motivations and beliefs. Uh, so like your own emotions aren't reality. We experience them as reality. Like as I said, like, oh, that person doesn't like me. Oh, that feels bad. I experience that as reality. But what's so helpful in using reflective function is to realize, like, oh, no, that's my experience of reality right now. I don't want to say, like, oh, that's wrong. No, no, it's valid. This is what my brain is telling me. And I can say, oh, thank you, brain, for reminding me that I'm worried about this person liking me or not. But that is not reality. And so if the emotion that I'm feeling is helping me take action, like, oh my God, did I do something to offend you? Oh, that emotion I'm feeling helps me take action, right? But sometimes the emotion that you're feeling gets in the way of what's important to you. And that's where you want to reframe it um, and acknowledge the emotion. And then like, oh, right. Like, yeah, that's kind of important that knowing nothing else, I want everyone to like me. Sure. But like, if I had to choose between this random person liking me and my kids liking me, well, I'm glad at least I have this. And like, so we can use these different skills of like reflection, gratitude, mindfulness to break free from like the autopilot or black or white thinking that we are stuck on.
Hmm. I wanted to ask that when you're experiencing those emotions and those thoughts of like, oh, like it's so important to
Yeah,
me.
did me interrupting you make you think that I wasn't interested in your question?
Yes. Um, Dang, I forgot the question now.
Anyway, when I
Oh,
was talking to people, yeah.
oh, thank you. Didn't continue interrupting. Nice. I was gonna say, so
I'm
when
not
you're feeling
interrupting. I'm just excited to talk. Sorry.
when you are in a situation where you're feeling that way, are you ever able to walk away from that and immediately realize that you have just met someone and have increased your prospects of impacting people? Or
Uh,
does it take a long time for
I
you
mean,
to get
sometimes, so
out of
like,
that thinking?
sometimes it's really easy, like, based on your mood and like how you slept last night and the last few people that you spoke with. Like, if you just recently spoke or hung out with people who think really highly of you, and then you talk to someone else who's never heard of you, sometimes it doesn't affect you that much because you're like, oh, well, that's just one person, right? Like if you're at a party and everyone's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And like you're really excited and there's someone you don't know. Okay, like I don't need to talk to them. Like, but sometimes if you're already a bit stressed, maybe because you didn't sleep well, or you haven't been eating, you haven't been exercising, like little dumb things. And then, oh, someone said something to you that's you're not really sure about how you should feel about it. And then, oh, there's something else is going on big in your life. Well, then your emotional circuitry is more reactive. And then the same exact interaction or, person now triggers all of this emotion and negative self-talk and self-doubt. But it's helpful to realize like, oh, right, like you are the same exact person who feels confident and now you're feeling doubt. Nothing has actually changed about you, just your feelings change, and that's okay. And I think a lot of times people are so hung up on like they have to change their feelings at the moment that they get in their own way because you can't always change your moment to moment feelings. Like they just kind of are. But
I think
and
it can be,
more that you try and change those, that like then you get frustrated that you can't change them, and it's like, oh, like as I said, I I would want everything to feel easy and feel confident. It's more enjoyable. Like if I'm giving a talk, it's more enjoyable to like feel confident and enjoy it. But like sometimes I have to remind myself, right, like, okay, if the most important thing at this moment was to have fun and enjoy things, then I would just go, watch season 2 of Squid Game. I could do that. Oh, but it's actually more important to me to help this person or to give this talk. So the fact that I don't feel like it at the moment is perfectly okay. Now, if over time I never felt like it, and after months and months and months, it's like, huh, that's interesting. Like every time I'm doing this, I never feel like, huh, I wonder what's going. Oh, maybe I should stop doing this. That's a totally different thing. But sometimes people overinterpret their moment to moment feelings, and it's like, yeah, buddy, that's just part of having a human brain. And that's why, like, that's really why I wanted to record this video. I thought we were gonna talk more about like the fires and managing your anxiety, but it's all related to the same concepts of like focusing on, I call it the important controllables matrix, of what's important to you and what you have control over. Like that's all you need to, um, that's all you need, and then use reflective function to sort out which is which. But like, it's like I used to think there's something wrong with me because I, doubted myself, or the like, well, if I had more abilities, I should have more confidence. It's like, nope, you just need to stop thinking that your emotions are the most important thing. They're important, they're relevant, they're valid, they're helping you. But like often we are faced with a choice of like, well, if you want to do what feels easiest and most comfortable right now, you could do that. You could just call in sick. You could do whatever. On the other hand, if what you wanted to do was like have a bigger impact or get a promotion or whatever, like well, you could do that. And your brain throws a temper tantrum because like, no, but I want both. And that's where we get stuck because we just acknowledge, oh, the emotions that's creating and pulling me in different directions. Well, I'm the one who gets to choose and prioritize what is more important to me. And the way that people get stuck in anxiety and self doubt a lot of times is that they don't realize they have that choice. They think their emotions are reality, and therefore their deeper circuits in their brain, their habit circuit, their emotion circuit, ends up calling the shots. They end up being on autopilot because their habit circuit is making the decision for them instead of getting to make their own choices.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm sure. I realize like I love talking about this stuff, as you can tell, and like I love talking to you about it because you have such great questions and you're so inquisitive. I feel like we should leave people there though, unless like, did you have another burning question you wanted to ask?
I just wanted to add something. I wanted to say that it's really interesting that you said that people think that they have to change like their moment to moment feelings. Because like that says something about who they are or whatever. And I think that it's really, really hard to get out of that mindset because like you said, I mean, our feelings we experience as reality. And so we truly believe that our feelings are who we
Right.
are. And so, when we've been depressed for 3 days, we think, oh, I'm a sad person and I'm not fun to be around, or, whatever it is. And I think that I don't know how to get out of that.
Well, like, but that's the first step. And there was a great paper. I was just in the second edition of the upward spiral that I was working on just now. Like, I'm trying to include this new paper I came across that um, looked at the power of like reframing things and like reminding yourself of like everything you're good at and whatever. Like it's an important skill to have. They teach it in cognitive behavioral therapy called cognitive reappraisal. um, but there's other research sort of more based on mindfulness that's more focused on like, well, just have some non-judgmental awareness, like just acknowledge your emotions. um, and that's also a good skill to have. um, and what this paper did was saw how these two things interacted. So they scanned people's brains with fMRI, and I can't remember the exact emotional task, but they did something that had, caused their brain to have emotional reactivity. I think it was, emotional faces or something. And then they had some people say, okay, just think positively. Just think about it in a different way. Try and make yourself feel better, whatever. And that had some good effects. But what they found is that if you just like label your feelings, that is like just be aware and
Mhm.
acknowledge the feelings that you're already feeling, and then try to change them, uh, or refocus or reframe them, it has a much bigger effect. But a lot of times people try and skip that step. They're feeling down and they're like, okay, well, stop feeling down, or like just break out of it. And they just try and skip that step as opposed to acknowledging and accepting where they are. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I've been depressed for 3 days. Okay. But like, we can't often acknowledge that and accept it because then the moment we start to, we're like, no, but what if this keeps going on or whatever? And then we're not actually experiencing reality or our emotions,
Hmm.
we're immediately thinking about everything else. The moment you be like, oh yeah, I am feeling really down. I'm feeling really nervous. I'm feeling really worried.
Hmm.
It's a moment of mindfulness that creates an opportunity because without that awareness, your emotion and habit circuits are perfectly willing to live your life on autopilot. You can tell yourself, I'm fine or whatever. And they'll be like, okay, great. You go do you. And we'll just be pulling the strings behind the scenes. By becoming aware of those emotions, you can then notice, oh, yeah, like that. I'm feeling really sad. And that's pulling me to then give up or, not exercise or isolate or whatever. Or I'm anxious about this presentation. So that's pulling me into, looking at my phone and whatever. It's like, oh, thank you, brain, for trying to find the quickest, fastest way to avoid this emotion. Well, that's not helpful right now. I'm actually going to tolerate this emotion. I'm going to say it's okay to feel this emotion for a little bit, and I'm just going to, go for a walk. I'm just going to do something a little bit more positive because um, if you can't tolerate even little bits of emotion, then your brain's just going to find the quickest way to avoid feeling that emotion. And then your emotions are actually in control of you, but you'll just be unaware of that.
Yeah. I think that we often make the mistake of thinking that our feelings are the problem instead of the situation, and that if we
Yeah.
felt different, things
You're
would be better.
right. But your feelings are often telling you about what the problem actually is. Like, okay, so you've been depressed for 3 days. Hmm, maybe instead of just saying, I don't want to be depressed, maybe just take a moment to be like, huh, I wonder what's been going on in my life that has created this. Like maybe it's some big cosmic thing. Sometimes it's like a dumb thing. Like, oh, right. I was a little worried about this. And then I like stayed up too late and then I got terrible sleep. And then I, it made me feel worse. So I didn't exercise and I didn't eat healthy. And then I felt worse about myself. And then I didn't call my friends and I felt worse. I can't solve everything. So let me just start with like the dumb things. Like, let me just go to sleep at a better time tonight and like, turn off the lights a little bit earlier. Maybe you just go for a walk and get some sunlight. These are all little things that modulate the activity and chemistry of the brain. People want to learn more, they can like read the upward spiral. I encourage them to do that. But like when I'm coaching people in the upward spiral method, like that's part of it. Is like, well, okay, just like nail down the little dumb things. And a lot of times people don't do that because like, no, but I can't go for a 5 mile run. I used to go for a 5 mile run and I can't do that now. I don't have the time. So, okay, well, your mental blocks that you're creating are making you more stressed out than you need to be. Cause like, okay, then don't go for a 5 mile run. Go for a 5 minute walk. Like
It
that's not going
sounds
to solve everything, but it'll at least mean like you stop making things worse. And uh, the emotions that we're feeling that we're often trying so hard to avoid often give us the answer. Like, hmm. I mean, if this is the first time this ever happened to you, that you were worried about something or anxious, okay, then who knows? I don't know. But like, if this is a pattern that happens over and over again, then maybe after like, I don't know, the 10th time that you have this presentation and you're freaking out, or the 20th time you procrastinated about whatever, some point you should get curious. Like, I wonder why that is happening. And then your habit circuit will be like, oh, there's no reason it's happening. It's pointless. What like, okay, well, let me just try to control these things I can control. Let me just think about what's important to me because oftentimes what is happening is that you are taking for granted the things that are most important to you and you're not thinking about them at all. You're not thinking about your family. You're not thinking about your own happiness or whatever it is. And your brain is trying to tell you, hey, buddy, these things that you're ignoring while you're focusing on, do the numbers add up or do they get more clients? Yeah, those things are out of your control, but like they're also not as important as this other stuff. Uh, and so, uh, like just being mindful of those emotions and getting curious about their origins can help us often be more intentional about what we do about them. Uh, so yeah, well, it was wonderful talking with you today. I always feel like I need to cut off the conversation because like I think we could always talk for hours. Uh, but this is what I've realized is like, right, just because I enjoy it doesn't mean it's always the most helpful for people. So this is sometimes like the opposite of that. It's like, oh, but I could just join and keep doing. It's like, oh, thank you, brain, for reminding me that it's important to me to like have fun, engaging conversations. Oh, it's also important to me to like not overwhelm people with information. So I think that's a good place
I
to
think
wrap.
so too. Thank you for elaborating on all of that stuff.
Well,
And I'm
thank you
sorry
for
we didn't get to
asking.
talk about the fire.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we talked about the fire too. I was gonna say like it sounded at first like your voice was, a little hoarse. I don't know if, but it seems like you're far enough away from
I
the
was
city.
on campus last night, like really, really late, and it was really dark. But you could see the fire and it was illuminated like crazy. It was really, really scary. I'd never seen that before.
Yeah, it's freaky. Um, but yeah, well, I'm glad you're safe. I can be glad that we have the fire department. It's also frustrating and scary, and we can feel grateful. Like we can break out of that black or white thinking.
Yeah.
So
Grateful
yeah,
there's no school today. Just kidding.
there you go. Uh, okay. Well, have a great one, and thanks everyone for listening.